evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining today's podcast, which is basically a discussion between you and Professor Shabih Zedi and Mr. Shaukat Ali Javed Sahib, who is basically a well-known personality in journals, edition, foreign finance, and he'll introduce himself. So, the topic of today's podcast is sick techs, and I will give it over to Professor Shabih Zedi to please, sir, introduce yourself, and then to
Sure.
Mr. Shaukat Ali Javed to introduce himself, sir.
Thank you, Moshe. And first of all, welcome all to this presentation on behalf of Sadiq International Virtual University. My name is Dr. Shabi Zaidi, and I'm an old antiquated steam engine, basically in otolaryngology, working for the NHS. And I've been associated with NHS since 1968 when I first came to do my post-graduation. Then I went back to my home country, which is Pakistan. I worked there in different capacities, ultimately reaching the state of professor, chair, etc. Then migrated to the UK. And then, of course, did a lot of things like built a medical college in Barbados, established a university, Fatima University in New Jersey. And I've been working. And now, of course, I'm doing part-time job in the NHS and also reading and writing. I've published several books. The latest book that's come out on behalf of Sadiq Virtual University is called Global Medical Education, which is fruitful discussion, collaboration, deliberations, and expressions of very, very learned scholars from 21 countries. And so it's my pleasure to have my old friend Shaukat Javed, that we've known each other since my early days. When we started working, I think I was an assistant professor we first met, and he started the medical journalism. Shaukat and I have been friends for years. I mean, really, that kind of friendship is rare to see these days. I mean, it goes without saying. Recently, Uneza Niaz, one of our co-authors of this book, that Shaukat Ali Javed. This was the book that we first, Shaukat, you might remember, we published in 1994, 95. We started, it took 2 years to publish this book. First ever book of medical ethics in the subcontinent. And in those days, even Childress and Buchan were not written, or maybe they had, we didn't know about it. So over to you, Shaukat. Please introduce yourself, and then, of course, we'll discuss.
Thank you, Shabi, and thank you, Mubashir Sahab. Thank you, SIUT, for providing this opportunity. My name is Shaukat Ali Javed, and I am a student of medical journalism. I started my professional love affair with medical journalism in 1966. And since then, I have been associated with the medical profession for more 54 years. And I have learned everything from the medical profession. I'm grateful to them. Shabi is one of the teachers. And currently, I edit a fortnightly medical newspaper, Pars International. I am the chief editor of Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences, the medical journal with the highest impact factor from Pakistan for the last 10 years. I am also the secretary of the Eastern Mediterranean Association of Medical Editors, IMAMI, that covers the whole WHO region in the EMRO. And then I am running at present a course in certificate in medical editing and advanced course in medical editing, leading to diploma in medical journalism at University of Health Sciences. We have so far past 6 batches have qualified. 6th batch, Viva is due. The second batch of advanced course has just completed their internship training at Karachi. They spent 1 day in JPM office, 1 day in my office, 1 day in CPHO to know all 3 impact factor journals follow different business models. So we wanted them to learn everything so that they can edit a new medical journal, either it is a private journal or a specialty or a medical institution. So they should know everything how to run a journal. So that's just in brief, and thank you very much. I'm here to learn today. Thank you.
So let me start by saying that this book that we jointly wrote had Maqbool Jafri was one of the editors, Uneza was one, and of course, Professor Zaki Hassan. So I'd like to dedicate this podcast to our friends, Dr. Maqbool Jafri in particular, Dr. Zaki Hassan, Colonel Najib Khan, and many others who have passed away. This was the first ever book published on medical ethics, which was edited by Shaukat, myself, Uneza Niaz Anwar, and Maqbool Jafri in 1994, way back when people didn't know about medical ethics, and we learned over the years. And now, of course, for many, many years, I've been writing, and I've published 2 more books on medical ethics. One was published by Springer about 5-6 years ago. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting subject. And Mubashir, you're the moderator. Perhaps you can initiate the discussion, and then...
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction and dedication of this podcast. I would like to start this with Professor Shabi Haidarzadi. If you can maybe talk a little about what are the principles of normative ethics.
Right. Let's begin at the beginning. The word ethics comes from the Greek word called ethos. And it basically etiquette, mannerism, discipline, behavior. See, in the field of medical education, it's a triangle: knowledge, skills, and attitude. Now, the attitude is ethics. It's all about behavior and mannerism and things. The normative principles of medical ethics, which differ between the West and the East. And I'd like to just basically quote from my publications over the years, and also from the book that I've just showed you, that in the West, the famous book that came out by Beecham and Childress came out in 90s, but we didn't read it till much later. But it was documented in 1994. The 4 cardinal rules are autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Now, each one has its own character and definition, but autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. These are the 4 cardinal rules that are used in medical ethics in the West. But we have a lot of Eastern participants, etc. So I'll just give you the Eastern aspect also. In the West, it's different, but in the East, the first factor is bir, beneficence. So it's like and takrim. Al-takrim, wal-bir, wal-adl, wal-ihsan. These are the 4 Eastern ethical principles. I'll repeat: bir, beneficence; then takrim, respect, autonomy, dignity; then adl, justice; and then ihsan. Ihsan is the ultimate. Ihsan is a combination of justice with altruism and all the other factors that you can think of. These are the cardinal rules. But fundamentally, if you look at the theories of ethics, the 3 famous theories. The first is deontology, which was introduced by Immanuel Kant in the 18th century. Then utilitarianism, which came a little bit later by Stuart Mills, Bentham and Mills. And then there's virtue ethics. Now, virtue ethics has been there from the times of Plato. Plato started the concept of virtue ethics. Aristotle expanded, and it has been forgotten for almost 1,000 years, revived by McIntyre in 1980s or even later. And that virtue ethics is my favorite. I love it because it's so close to Islamic principles and other principles, Christianity and other principles. And virtue ethics has 4 fundamental rules, they're cardinal rules, and these are courage, compassion, beneficence, and justice. And so these are the important factors. But we'll discuss as we go on that the principles of ethics are also relative to certain cultures. But that is not what is called moral relativism. Morality is universal. But cultural aspects differ. For example, surrogate consent is acceptable in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and African countries, but it's not acceptable in the Western culture. So that is the fundamental rule. But we move on to discuss more. Go on. Shaukat, you want to add something to it?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add, I had a chance to interview Professor Sachedina from Virginia University. He has done a lot of work on Islamic bioethics.
Where did
He
you
also
meet
written books.
Where did you meet him?
He came to Pakistan and I talked to him and I interviewed him. So yeah, very, very learned man. And then he said that but in Islamic bioethics, the concept of autonomy doesn't stand. You see, so for example, somebody is suffering from a communicable disease and he say, I don't want to get treated. His autonomy can't be permitted. He can infect other community members. So you can't give him the autonomy. You can't accept. So at stage come where your personal autonomy finishes and you become a source of infection to the community and society. So the Western concept of autonomy, he said, no, that's not okay in Islam. So that's one difference. And the most comprehensive definition of medical ethics which I could see was it is a set of moral principles which govern the practice of medicine. I think it conveys a lot. Morality has to do a lot in ethics, whatever profession you may be, whatever field you may be. And ethics is not confined to medical only. Ethics in every profession, even for journalism, we have to be ethical. So we have to uphold professional ethics, ethical principles in all disciplines, even business, engineering. You talk any profession, lawyers, they have to be ethical. Once you are unethical, a lot of problems come there.
Absolutely right. So, Mubashir,
So much.
do you have any points that you want to
Yes,
stimulate?
thank you so much, Professor Shaukat Javed. I would like to pose another question to you, Professor Shabi Haider Zaidi. Understanding the concept, can you explain the term sick tax and how it differs from the formal taxation imposed by?
I think the best would be that if I can share the screen, because I've prepared a few slides. It's a very, very complex subject. And I think this sick tax, I first learned this term from the late Maqbool Jafri. He was extraordinary. I mean, he was a director of pharmaceutical companies. He was a top class physician. He was part of our team in discussions, debates, and everything. But later on, I read a lot. Sick tax has been there for a long, long time. And if I could just share the slides for a minute or two to give the definition, which is more specific definition. Can I just share the screen? Let me just, okay. So can I just, right. So if I can just, it's obvious here. It's a basically sick tax, a broad terminology refer to hidden costs and additional financial burdens that individual occur during the health condition. Like it's very, very unlike the formal tax the government levies upon. This is more like a tax like out-of-pocket medical expenses, loss of income due to inability to work, and more importantly, the perks and the travel grants and the 5-star corner, the Shaukat will tell us more about it, that we hold in different countries, and travel, all those things that are done by pharmaceutical industries or appliance manufacturers given as perks to doctors, which is then added on because it's then transmitted to the patient. But moving on, just share one or two more. This is the exact definition that you can read for yourself. It's not a direct test, but a metaphorical term, which is used to describe the economic strain placed on individuals because of the chronic illness and the drugs that, and this may not apply to the countries like the UK because we have a national health service and it's a blessing that we have, government pays for. But in other countries where you have to pay for the expenses, hospital stays, doctor's visits, ongoing treatments, chronic illnesses, appliances like pacemaker, etc. All that is complicated, multiplied, and added on because of the hidden costs in medical appliances. Now, it also combines in countries where, for example, insurance, like in the USA, in other countries where the insurance, you have to pay for the insurance. So the insurance premium goes up because of this tax. And in conditions like chronic illnesses, because the capacity to earn is lost, so the inability to work, so you have to have compensation. And all that is compounded onto the cost of drugs. And Shaukat will tell us more about it because I hear a lot about the cost of drugs that's going on. And finally, just one more thing. It has many impacts. Social impact, individually, the people are affected because of the cost of living crisis going on even in the UK at the moment. Most of the developing countries, financial strain, health inequality, mental health issues, all those combined together is a broader terminology for a sick tax, which means the patient who's sick has to bear the burden of research and perks and travel grants and other conditions that combined together. Over to you, Shaukat. Would you like to add something to it?
Thank you, Shabi. If I recall, you see, when there was a time when JPMC annual symposium was the only academic activity in Pakistan. This symposium used to last about a week, and the inaugural session we used to have cake piece one and a cup of tea. There was no lunch. The symposium will last about a week, and it was an honor to be accepted as one of the oral speakers in the symposium. But then things started going wrong. Now, at present, you see, the medical profession is so addicted to having meeting in five-star hotels. They not only hold these meetings, it's all fully paid family picnic. But and not only that, they also make money out of that. If I can tell you, one of the specialty organization in one meeting had a profit of 1 crore 32 lakh. Another specialty organization had a profit of 1 crore 20 lakhs. And another cardiac society had a meeting in National Medical College Multan. They spent on dinner 1 crore rupees. Out of this, 60 lakh was given to one of the ghazal singers, Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, and then rest was on done. Next day, they paid 40 lakh rupees to Hadika Kiani, and the rest for the again 80 lakh rupees. In Faisalabad, there was an orthopedic surgery conference, and at 10, nobody was there in the hall. And one of the speaker from Saudi Arabia, there are 5 people sitting. He refused to make the presentation. Then the organizer had to bring the pharma people in, and another meeting in Peshawar, psychiatric conference. Professor Arshad from America was one of the speakers. Royal College of Psychiatry president was the next speaker, and there was nobody in the hall at 9:30. And the organizer had to run hither and thither and bring the people to come in, so that they were all having either breakfast or having sleep in their comfortable room. So that's what the problem. Then again, in another psychiatric conference, the first session started with papers on a product, Clozaril. One after 9 speakers in the first session on one product, but they were all sponsored by the pharma company. Then at gastroenterology conference, I tell you, there was 3 days. I mean, there are 26 papers on one product in the International Gastroenterology Conference. And then on the third day, I just couldn't tolerate. The third day, I was delighted. One of the speakers from South Africa is a gastric surgeon. He stood up and he said, I thought I had come to an international gastroenterology conference, but you're all sold to just one product, octreotide, doctotide, sandostatin. It is just like Abe Zamzam for you. You don't need anything else. I mean, this was too much. Then again, more recently in the cardiology conference, one of the speakers made a presentation on statin. He was from England, and he's displayed the slides. And every slide there was a Pfizer monogram and Lipitor, Lipitor, Lipitor. After the meeting, I stood up and I first introduced myself. He never knew me, and I said, "Would you like to make the same presentation in UK?" He said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't make it." Then I turned to the organizer. I said, "Shame on you. What are the message you are conveying to the audience? I mean, how can you allow this to make a presentation with the company slide and the name of the product? All this goes on in this country, unfortunately. And you see, the way in the National Bioethics Committee made some guidelines which are never implemented. And this is the sorry state of affairs. Unfortunately, regulatory bodies have failed to monitor this. And I always believe medical profession should start self-monitoring and self-accountability. अगर आपका ज़मीर हुसैन जिंदा है तो then you know this is something wrong, you don't do it. But if the ज़मीर हुसैन जब मर जाता है तो you can't do anything. But if sleeping, I keep on pricking them. So maybe I am able to prick some of them and they wake up. But unfortunately, things are not going the way I want.
We certainly need people like you, Shaukat, and you've always stood up for the right reasons and right causes for the last 40, 50 years.
Recently, I was told by one of the specialty organizations, आप बहुत लोग आपसे बहुत नाराज हैं. And another health minister said, be careful, people are नाराज हैं. Then he said, there is a manufacturing fault in you. I said, I respect your diagnosis. There is a manufacturing fault. I was born in a poor family, and I know what poverty is. I know how the people behave and treat the poor. And God has been very kind. I have progressed a lot. Came to the middle class and the upper middle class. But I always remember, I see how the people are facing, how they are being looked after by the authority. So when the healthcare is not accessible, you have to think of them.
So would you say that the cost of drugs and all the appliances has gone up, particularly in Pakistan and the developing countries, because of these perks and travel grants?
Absolutely, absolutely. It plays a lot. You see, one of the, I can tell, General Mahmood Ahmad Akhtar, who retired as Surgeon General of Pakistan Army, he sent me a prescription written by a professor. It had 28 drugs. He said, what is the justification in this? There's nobody is looking at these prescriptions and nobody is monitoring this profession. And they just write drugs needed, which are not needed, just to please companies for the business sector.
Well, fortunately, it does not happen in the UK. I mean, I've been in practice here for the last 25 years. Hardly ever does a medical rep or somebody will come to you. If there is an appointment, they'll make an appointment, but you have to declare that to the manager, to the health authority that I'm seeing this and this. And many times they sponsor a conference, like, for example, a proper conference with academic activities. So they will sponsor it with tea and coffee and just a cookie, etc., but nothing more. No exorbitant lunches like we have seen in Pakistan over there, India. So I think that is the problem. But there should be regulation and monitoring of these activities, and that is the responsibility of the government and the organization. This is what I understand.
I went to one of these psychiatric conference in the Middlesex psychiatric group in Birmingham. And you see, but there were few Pakistanis. They had brought their wives and children with them. They were not allowed in. They were asked to send their families to other restaurant to have dinner, and they will not come to the Manigran.
You're absolutely right.
Because otherwise they will not get that credit.
Yeah.
They complained they won't get that credit, and they will lose this academic.
That reminds me of a very old story. I was a WHO consultant on noise many, many years ago, and we had a meeting in Geneva. And a very famous professor came over from Pakistan. So as five of us were going to meet, in a group to have the group discussion about noise management, etc., this gentleman, very senior professor, walked in with me, and I couldn't stop him because he was very senior, my old friend. But then he was stopped at the gate by the organizer. He said, if you don't have a badge, if you're not invited, he said, no, I'm a professor. He said, no, you may be whatever, but this is an exclusive group. And you probably stay outside. Now, this is very conventional. It happens. But this is really, unfortunately, part of the etiquette and mannerism that people have to learn and understand. So I think
I remember having attended quite a few conferences with you in England, British academic conferences. And one of the conferences I remember, the dinner was contributory. I paid £50 for the dinner in early 90s. Well,
Yes.
If you want to enjoy the dinner, buy a ticket. You don't want to, don't buy it. So there is always a contributory dinner. But in Pakistan, there is nothing like that. Everything has to be paid for by the pharma industry.
I think the same applies to India and Africa, but we have audience, we'll discuss it, open to debate in a moment. Mawashir, do you want to move on?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for enlightening us on the very important implications of sick text.
Can you show your face also? We'd like to see what's happening in Malaysia.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. So basically,
that's better. That's the Twin Towers, the famous Twin Towers.
Thank you so much, sir. So I would like to ask, like Professor Shabih Zadi, on what ethical lessons can be learned from that syphilis-related test case study, the ECT trial. So if you can elaborate us on that, sir.
Yes, that is where Shaukat will be very helpful, but I'll just introduce. Shaukat knows more about the inside story of all the research, so-called research goes on that in many countries.
You go ahead, you know everything, yes. Please go ahead.
No, I'll just mention a couple of famous stories and something that happened only recently. So I'd like to share the slides because it's very interesting. This is a very old story which started many, many years ago, but let me just share the slides. So we'll go on to the, just move the slide down.
Sir, there is a menu up there, slide shares.
Yeah, I've done that. So I'm just moving on to talk about the Tuskegee syphilis. Now, this is a very interesting story, Shaukat, and the audience, which I discovered much later when I came to England and whatever, that this is called the Tuskegee syphilis study, which was conducted between 1932 and 1972, 40 years, where children, we can read it here, untreated syphilis in African Americans in Birmingham, Alabama, in America. They carried out this 600 black men and 39 with syphilis, etc. And they were told that's a free treatment by the government. In fact, what they were doing was they were looking at the natural course of events of syphilis if it remained untreated, even though penicillin was discovered and they could have given it. So this was a disaster. It was a horrible story. And in 1974 or much later, I remember when President Clinton was the president, he had to come to apologize to the African Americans for this study, which was carried out for 40 years. And that's not enough. What's more, and I'd just like to the impact of that was that chronic illness and the problems the healthcare system strained was manifested and much later. And even the inquiry did not happen till later. What happened was that in this condition, informed consent was, this is the pillar. Informed consent is the pillar of medical ethics. Although Shaukat is right that autonomy is not a priority in the Eastern countries, but it's in the West. In the West, autonomy is most important. You cannot disclose the secret of the patient, even to his wife, without proper consent. And I see Imtiaz Ghulam is a very senior general practitioner here. He'll join us in a moment. We'll unmute him and talk to him about it. So informed consent is the spine of medical ethics. Without informed consent, you can't do anything at all. So in the case of Tuskegee syphilis, there was a racism, exploitation of the poor people. They were not given the treatment which was available, and there was no informed consent. So eventually it became a huge, huge story. And I'm sure similar stories happen in Pakistan, India, and elsewhere. Shaukat, over to you.
Thank you, Shabi. See, these are all stories, syphilis and the Germans and the so many unethical, and that gave way to the World Medical Association, and the guidelines around medical ethics came in, and then the different associations come in. It was actually the community and the society which pressed for medical ethics and ethical practices. There was a lot of pressure from the community. They came forward, and the medical profession had to listen to them. So I think we need some pressure groups and some whistleblowers who can keep on talking about these things from time to time, so that there is a great awareness, and then governments are forced to act.
You're absolutely right. Whistleblowers are very important. And in the General Medical Council's ethical hub, one particular hub is given to work ethics. And in work ethics, one of the most important things is whistleblowing. The problem is that if you become a whistleblower, you face a lot of troubles. I remember when I was a student here in 19, God knows when I was doing a primary FRCS, one of our senior professors, a very famous man, Professor David Sloan, was professor of physiology at the Royal College. He said in those days that there is a gentleman by the name of Pepperworth who's come out with a story of human beings used as human guinea pigs. And he published a book, famous book called The Human Guinea Pigs. And the gentleman was discarded by the community. He had to lose his license to practice. He disappeared for many years. And then he became a very important factor or contributor to anti-experimentation groups. We'll come to that in a minute when we come to vaccines. So there is a story there. There's a lesson to learn here that if you want to be a whistleblower, you have to be very careful. You should guard yourself, take precautions because you can be disadvantaged. But whistleblowing is a moral factor. If you see something which is going wrong, it is your job, your moral, your conscience duty to either check it or tell this gentleman properly, quietly maybe, or this person who's doing this malpractice, that don't do it. Eventually, you have to go to the higher authority to inform, because the safety of patients is your first factor, beneficence and non-maleficence. You will not let the harm come to the patient. That is the moral duty of a health worker. Do you agree with that?
Maybe if
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the main problem which I have over the years observed, there the medical profession doesn't get a good name. The image is sinking because they don't listen to the patient. The clinical skills are extremely important to come to the diagnosis. I was listening to the Royal College of Physicians, London president, a few months back. He making a presentation, Khan University symposium. He said history and physical examination is still extremely important.
Yes.
It is the backbone of diagnosis. Despite all these information technology and diagnostic revolution, you have to do it. This is the best way to diagnose it. Unfortunately, it's not taught. It's no more taught in medical schools. Nobody bothers about how to take history, how to listen to the patient. I always say they attend workshop on communication skills. That's important. But they must know how to listening skills. Listen to the patient. They don't listen to the patient and they start writing prescription. So they miss many things. Even Khaja Sadiq Sahib, who died recently, he used to say this. He said, I am extremely very sad these days because of the medical profession has been infected with the commercialization and corruption virus. He named it CC virus. I mean, this is how things have been going on.
Communication skills is one of the most essential components of medical ethics. And if you do not have good quality communication skills, you have to be a patient listener. You're absolutely right. History, you start with the first thing, introduction, etc., and then go stepwise. Patient listening, passive listening, and active interpretation that define communication skills. There are special communication skills workshops that we have to attend in GMC. So over a period of, well, I must have done about 10, 15, attended with professionals who are professional actors who come to teach. In fact, in Birmingham, because it was close to Warwickshire, Shakespeare's birthplace, etc., a lot of actors used to come, and they were superb in giving sign of grief and anger and loss of breaking the bad news, or simple things like communication is a very important factor, and that is a part of medical ethics that should be taught. That is an important thing. So moving on, because the time is running out. Moshe, do you have any more
So,
questions?
yes, sir. I would like to ask about the regulatory measures that uh, what regulatory measures and reforms have been proposed or implemented to mitigate the unethical practices in medical research and pharmaceutical manufacturing, if you can highlight, sir.
So let me just go back to the screenshot here. I think I have a few. Shaukat mentioned very kindly about the now, this is, I think, before we go on, can I just briefly talk about this also? Shaukat, this is a very
Yeah,
interesting
please. Yes.
the ASHG trial. This was, then you can talk about Helsinki Declaration, Belmont, etc., etc. This was the other thing that was done in 1990s, 1980s, and this anti-retroviral drug was tested in several African countries to determine its efficacy in preventing mother-to-child transmission of HIV. The trials involved comparing a short, less expensive regimen of AZT with a placebo, and the use of placebo is by itself an ethical problem. Should you use placebo if the effective drug is already available or not? I remember Dr. Mahmoud Jafri talking a great deal about it many, many years ago, that placebos cannot be used if already established drugs are available. And this
Yes.
was it was carried out. And the worst thing was that it was use of placebo when the drug was available, which was fully tried and tested and everything. Informed consent was not taken, and the exploitation of vulnerable population was carried out during this particular AZT trial or AZ trial. This is a documented story. And now, what it highlighted was the ethical guidelines, and Moshe just mentioned, and you also mentioned, that what are the ethical guidelines rules which are necessary for research, either national or international. International research is even worse, because the famous universities from the West go to the Eastern countries and they exploit. The heads of the departments get involved, and you'll tell us more about it. And that is briefly, I'll just mention, and then we'll talk about it. The Declaration of Helsinki, what came up, and the ethical principles of medical research. And more importantly, in the later days, it was the Belmont Report, which I respect enormously. I think I've got a slide about here. This was the effect of, just briefly, informed consent, accountability, what we learned from the lessons. There was one slide about exploitation of vulnerable people. Everybody knows what happened. Yes, this is the other thing, and we'll talk about that. Belmont Report came up much later after Hitler. See, Hitler, etc., Nazi, we all know about Dr. Mengele and what happened in 19, the Nuremberg trial, the Nuremberg Code of Ethics, Helsinki Declaration by World Medical Association, the Belmont Report came up, which said that respect, dignity, autonomy, etc., and beneficence. You should not compromise on beneficence. This was the other story where heparin contamination was carried out. That caused a lot of problems. I'd like to highlight this to all the audience, which is only recent. Let me just come to that. This is the latest, Shaukat. You'd be impressed with it. This is the latest story. And I think it's worth writing about in your article or your journal and newspaper also. This was only recently, and I'll just go to one more slide before I do that. So what happened here was that this was a study that was carried out in the UK, where contaminated blood, infected blood, was used. It's a tragic story of negligence, injustice in the UK. Between 70s and 80s, this, you can read it, that blood products were given, I think it was factor 8, which is contaminated with hepatitis and HIV, and this was given to the patients. Now that whole lot of people have now come out, and this was scandals been going on, and these patients are suffering with HIV, and they've got a stigma, some of them have died because of diseases, so they took the cases to the court of law. I will not go into the details, it's available, and these slides will also be available. But what happened, this is very interesting, that I noted, I was watching TV, that suddenly I saw, listen to this. There so many inquiries went out, and what happened was that this is the final slide I'd like you to read. I've just sent an editorial to Dr. Fatma Jawad on this. This is the day of shame. The Prime Minister of Britain, Rishi Sunak, announced in the House of Parliament on 21st of May 24 that the government accepts that, not just one government, governments over the years, accept the responsibility along with the NHS for the abuse of authority, malpractice, etc., and multi-million pounds payment has to be made to the victims of this condition. Infected blood given in 1780s and ending up with HIV and cancer and stigma and so forth. So this was exactly that has come up recently. I wanted to highlight this, that this was a famous story of negligence which happened here in the UK. So coming back to
the, over to Shaukat Javed Sahab, if you can say a few words on this.
I think, as Shabi mentioned, you see, medical ethics, you cannot enforce it by rules and regulations. I personally feel you have to be ethical in yourself. You have to listen to your conscience and then decide. That is the best way. If we start practicing ethics ourselves, try to teach it, try to propagate it, try to publish these concepts. And at the same time, those who are practicing unethical practices, they should be exposed also. I am not ashamed of naming and shaming the individuals, the institutions, and I have to pay the price for that, but I don't mind. So I think we have to do it, and we have to create awareness, and let's hope things will improve. And but we have to continue this struggle. Unfortunately, for the last so many years, we have been talking, we have been writing about. I'm myself often asked, "Have you made any difference?" I say, "Okay, maybe one day it will make difference." But then, if you keep silent, you are part of this criminal activity. We have to speak out. We have to create awareness about
that. Absolutely right. Sure.
Thank you, sir. I would like to highlight this, that what are the possible solutions for mitigating this? If Professor Shabi Haider, you can talk on this.
Well, the first thing is that, after this Nazi experimental era, I'll just go back into history, when they discovered in the Nuremberg trial what had happened in orchards and other camps, people who abused, etc. I'm not going to the details, But the first thing was the Nuremberg Code of Ethics. It had 10 points, where the most important thing was informed consent and respect and dignity of human life. Then much later came the Helsinki Declaration, and that has been, I think it was 1964. That's been revised several times, and also comprised of certain elements which are basically, they revolve around the fundamental rule of dignity of human life, care of human life, beneficence, non-beneficence, and justice. So if you're developing a research product in a certain country, the first and foremost thing is that you should let those people who have been the victim, who have been the volunteers in research, they should benefit with that drug. Many times when the international companies go to do research in Africa or Asia, the research is carried out, but it's carried out only for experimental purposes, and the drugs are not given to those people who have been volunteers. And that is now in the recent years what has come up, that if you're doing a research, international research, the drug or appliance which is applied or experimented on, it should be measured against benefits and risks. What are the benefits and what are the risks? And those risks must be mitigated by international authorities, local authorities, national authorities, following the fundamental rule of ethics. Justice is a prime factor. If you observe justice in everything, and I always say in my lectures and talks, that justice means your own conscience. Conscience is what is justice. Justice has to be seen to be delivered. Conscience you cannot see. So if you look at the moral story, you have the question of knowledge. Knowledge gives you power. You can do so many things like the atomic explosion, whatever. You have skills. You apply the skills and you can destroy the mankind if you like. But when you combine the two, it is the fulcrum of conscience which tells you whether you should use this knowledge and skill for the good or the evil purposes. And then conscience is what is the determinant of the third factor, or the most important factor, the pillar of justice, which is universal in all cultures, all religions, all faiths. So justice should prevail in all conditions.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to pose probably the final question to Professor Shaukat Javed Sahab, that how important it is the transparency and public trust in healthcare and pharmaceutical industries, and what steps can be taken to improve them in the light of past ethical violations?
I think the first thing which we in the National Bioethics Committee have suggested in our guidelines, the pharmaceutical industry must make it transparent whatever donations they pass on to the doctors and to the professional specialty organizations, to medical institutions. They should put it on their website. And similarly, all the professional specialty organizations should also put it on their website, whatever donations they have received. The transparency will be there and many of the ills will be eliminated. Secondly, the monitoring agencies, they should also play their role. Thirdly, I just only two small examples. It was in the early 70s when Dr. H. Said, Shabi will remember, a chest specialist from Pakistan. He told me in 1970 that his observation is that the combination of INH and thiazidazole is a cross resistance. It should not be given to the TB patient. When I reported that Bayer was selling it on a hot cake like a ditabin, they got denied. But then they went to Paris, made a presentation in the International Universal Lung Diseases, and the WHO took a notice. He was right, and the WHO banned that combination from all over the world. Second case was Helfen. Now, this drug, many deaths from the dosage which the company was proposing, it was spotted by his registrar, Dr. Nazam Bukhari, from Sheikh Zayed Hospital, Lahore. He sent me a case report. I told the company, is there any post-marketing surveillance? They had denied it. I published that report, case report. They got very much annoyed for all business. But see, after a year or so, the same observations came in Lancet, and the company had to write Dear Doctor letter all over the world, and that drug was withdrawn. So these are some of the very few cases. There are so many others, but we must keep an eye on this, keep on pointing out this. I said earlier, it's our responsibility. Patient safety should be our first concern, whether we are doctors, whether we are journalists, or whether pharma industry. You can still make money, you can still make profit if you work honestly. I firmly believe in this, and I have practiced and I have needed. Thank you very much.
Finally, before you open the debate to audience, I would like the audience to participate. One word about the vaccines. You know, the vaccine issue. Remember, recently the COVID vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, a lot of controversy arose because that people had complications, urticaria, even one case of reporter of blood clots, and that particular vaccine was withdrawn. But way back, I remember there was a story by a famous pediatrician called Andrew Wakefield, when he said that MMR vaccine is connected to autism. And that report was published in Lancet. Many years later, Lancet had to apologize and withdraw that report. And Wakefield was rusticated from JMC and it disappeared, etc. That's a different story. My point is that vaccine hesitancy has become a major issue. The major sports personality, politicians, doctors even, etc., who are against vaccines. And that has created a lot of problem. Recently, we had episodes of measles outbreaks in Wales and different parts of UK, same thing in other countries as well. So there is a story here that vaccines are important for life. But the ethical question is that those vaccines which are hurriedly developed, as was the case in COVID-19, might have led to so many problems. And there are cases where adverse reactions. So what's your opinion on that, Shaukat?
I think we had a trial in Pakistan on COVID, one of the Chinese vaccine. About 20,000 patients all over the country, 5 centers. I was one of the volunteers as well. I think we have to be very careful. The sites where the studies are being conducted, all the adverse reactions must be reported. And I can tell you, I was receiving a call from the University of Health Sciences every third day, fourth day. Have you any problem? Have you any fever? Anything else? That's the way I was so impressed with the way the trial was conducted. That's the way I think things should go.
So Moshe, would you like to open the debate?
Yeah, now we open if there are any questions or comments, you can unmute yourself or you can raise your hand and to pose a question. So if there are any, please suggest, or you can write a question in the chat box and I'll read it out.
Let's hear from some people. Imtiaz, can you unmute Imtiaz? We'd like to hear from him. He's a very senior teacher, trainer, tutor in general practice with a lot of it. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much. By the way, I'm Dr. Imtiaz Ghulam Ali. Shabibai knows me reasonably well. First of all, thank you very much for holding this meeting. I have to say that I was not aware of the sick tax. It was something for me to learn, okay? So thank you very much for enlightening me. I think it is not only an important topic, but also a very timely one. I take on board what has been said about what's the practices that are happening in the developing countries, such as Pakistan, and maybe in India and other places. But unfortunately, I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I'm seeing a gradual creeping in of such practices, even in developed countries like UK and USA. And in the BMJ, for example, you may have been aware that there have been a number of articles that have appeared. Kamran Abbasi, the editor of the BMJ, has brought in this issue about the funding of the royal colleges by the pharmaceutical industry. Shaukat Bhai did mention about the transparency, and it is not as transparent as we would like. Under the information gathering sort of freedom of information, the information was extracted, and at that time it was found that many royal colleges had a huge funding from the pharmaceutical industry. And the top on the list was the General Practitioners Royal College. We also hear about the influence that the ministers have played in trying to influence NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Guidelines, to influence their guidelines. And recently there have been this issue about one of the anti-cholesterol medicine in Kisloran, for example, where apparently the ministers were involved and tried to influence the committee members. So although it is not glaringly that obvious in UK, but it is gradually creeping in, and I think we need to be very mindful of it. And wherever possible, we need to bring up this issue. It is sad though, but it is happening. So that was my comment about the influence of pharmaceutical industry in the world, which seems to be on increase, if anything. We all know that majority of the professorial departments are heavily influenced by pharmaceutical industry as well. And as they say it commonly, there is no such thing as a free lunch. So one has to be mindful it. I'm not pointing a finger at anyone. I'm just saying it that in a very subtle way, things may be happening even here too. That was one of the comments. The second comment was with regards to the issue of autonomy. You said that autonomy is not that important in the East and very important in the West. But I have to say that there's no such thing as absolute autonomy even here. So we can breach autonomy here as well. But the good practice is that we are supposed to inform the patient that we are going to breach their autonomy. For example, if someone is driving and he or she should not be driving because of their medical condition, as a physician, it is our duty to tell them not to drive. But if we observe them driving, then, and despite us telling them, if they don't stop driving, then we have to tell them that I'm sorry. It is my duty to inform the DVLA for your safety and for the safety of others. The same is also for infectious diseases as well. So, and the big issue about safeguarding both for adults as well as children, the autonomy can be breached. So there is no such thing as absolute autonomy. It's a relative autonomy. But you need to have a very good grounds to do it. And you need to be, again, transparent, and you need to be upfront and tell the patient that I am going to breach your autonomy or your confidentiality. Coming on to the consultation skills, absolutely, I agree 100% with what has been said. I think it's and the increase in AI and availability of investigations are making people forget or ignore the importance of history taking. So we start relying on MRIs rather than, so we start treating the results, investigation results, rather than treating the patient. I remember someone telling me once, and I tried to stick to it. He said, keep quiet when the patient starts speaking, when you have an open question, for at least 1.5 to 2 minutes, and let the patient speak and you don't interrupt. And 80% of what the patient wants to say, they will say it within 2 minutes. So all their ideas, concerns, expectation, part of it you will glean through within 2 minutes if you just do proper active listening without interruption. So once again, thank you very much for highlighting it. I really enjoyed this program. I don't usually come to the program. This is probably the first time, Shabizab, that I have attended, and I was really impressed with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imtiaz. Thank you. You're an experienced person. Your chapter, your entry in the encyclopedia that we are compiling on the difference between confidentiality and privacy, that amazes me. And I think if you can briefly mention what's the difference between confidentiality and privacy, because you've written a beautiful entry in the encyclopedia, which is under preparation at the moment.
To be honest, I cannot remember the exact definitions now offhand. So you have caught me on the spot here. Okay.
I was reviewing your chapter only yesterday. So
Yeah.
confidentiality is a broader terminology. Confidential, like your addresses, your accounts, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Privacy is a particular space that you give to an individual, even between husband and wife. There has to be a very, very private space. So
Yeah.
privacy is different to confidentiality, and I was very impressed with that entry. And the question of autonomy that you may, I'd just like to add here that in the Eastern culture, we have what's called surrogate autonomy. So head of the family takes it because we have so much faith in our community, so much faith in the family unit. So if a matter comes to the head of the clan or Kabila, etc., it is the head who makes the decision for the entire, and that is acceptable because majority of the times, these people that we trust as head of the family or the clan or tribe is honest. But, and that's a big but, sometimes this head of the tribe and head of the clan who's approached by an international authority, International University of Collaboration, may be bribed. And that is where the question of surrogate autonomy becomes questionable. And you're absolutely right. There is nothing like absolute autonomy.
Yeah.
Bashir, over to you.
If there is any further questions or comments,
We'd like to hear from Africa and the Middle East. There are many scholars from. Anybody would like to say anything from their experiences before we conclude?
I think we call it a day, sir. So thank you so much, Professor Shabih Zadi and Professor Shaukat Ali Javed Sahab, for enlightening us on this important topic of Sikh texts. And thank you all for joining today's webinar. Hope to see you in our next webinar, and we'll announce it as we do so. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Mubashir Sahab. Thank you, Professor Shabih Zadi.
Thank you. See you again. Good to see you, Shaukat.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.